Alright, so today is January 9th, 2015, and we are interviewing Grandma. So, here we go. Here's Grandma.
So these questions are based on the StoryCorps set of questions.
Yes.
Take it, Stephen.
Alright, so when and where were you born?
I was born at 1416 Avenue J in Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York.
When?
February 23rd, 1925.
Alright.
And it's so funny. I always used to say I was born on the 22nd because it was Washington's birthday. But it wasn't right. It was February 23rd, 1925.
Tell us about your name. Who are you named for?
I must have been named for a relative of my mother's, but her name, it was a Hebrew name, but Aunt Molly was Americanized, and she decided that my name should be Beatrice, which was a very odd name at that time for a Jewish child. But that's how I ended up with Beatrice. But my name is Braina Chaya. Braina. It was Braina. In Breindel, they used to call me in Yiddish. And then when I was sick, when I was 9 years old, they gave me this additional name of Chaya, which means life, because I had pneumonia at that time. And they went to the synagogue and gave me that name of life, Chaya. Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
We lived in Brooklyn for until I was about 2, and then we moved to the Bronx.
What was your childhood like?
Well, it was very nice. I had a very close family, and we were always taken care of very well, even if we were poor. But I had everything I needed. I had everything I wanted. It was a lovely childhood. I had a lot of care. My aunts didn't have any children, and so they were very close to me and to my brothers. It was a lovely childhood.
How about you tell me about your parents?
Well, my mother was born in I suppose it's considered Poland today, but at that time it was Russia, and they came to America. I suppose my mother was already working in the United States at the age of 13 in a sweatshop. And that's what they did to support their parents and their other siblings. My mother had 2 sisters and a brother. She was next to the oldest. Her oldest sister was Esther. And my mother was Yetta, and then Aunt Molly and Uncle Jaime. My father was born in Lithuania. He came to the United States because Lithuania was taken over by Russia at that time. And his parents didn't want him to serve in the army. And being the oldest child of 16, they sent him to the United States. They were very wealthy. And they owned, my grandfather owned acres and acres of trees. And they would cut them down and send the logs to Germany. My father would ride the logs on the water to Germany. But then I suppose he came here when he was about 21. I really don't remember. I don't know the age. But he was a boarder in my mother's family's apartment. And that's how they met. And they got married in 1916.
Tell me about your brothers. What were they like growing up?
Oh my God, they were the best. My oldest brother was Benjamin, and the younger one was Abe, and I was the baby, and I was the only girl, so I was pampered, and I had a most wonderful childhood because of them. I didn't do a thing. They did everything for my mother. I did nothing. I didn't have to, and it was just, they were wonderful brothers, wonderful, wonderful brothers. To their dying days, they were the best brothers.
Did you get along with them?
Yes, very well. Not like you and your sister. Or not so much you and your sister, but some other siblings I know who had a very tough time growing up together. But in the end, they all managed well. Yeah.
Can you tell me about your other close relatives?
Well, my closest relatives, of course, because my aunts didn't have any children. Only my uncle had children, but they were younger than us. And we were family. I mean, we'd see each other very often. We lived in the same neighborhoods in the Bronx, but we weren't as close as if I had a cousin of my age, or my brothers had cousins of their age. They were much younger than us. So, but my closest relatives, of course, were my aunts, and my aunt Molly had a marvelous husband, and he adored me. I was just like his daughter. He was just like another father to me. But he died very young. When I was 16, he was already dead. Yeah. So that was very sad. Yeah.
Who are your favorite relatives?
My favorite were my aunts and my uncle. We adored them. Of course, my parents. Yeah, I adored them. Right. My brothers would go over to Aunt Molly's house every Sunday morning. She'd make them pancakes. We'd all go, but they would eat such an enormous amount, and I could only eat a couple. But they couldn't wait for Sunday morning. And then my Aunt Molly wasn't kosher, so she would have Campbell's chicken soup in her house and certain things that she would bring in, and they loved to eat it. My brothers loved to eat it. Yeah. So we just had a glorious, glorious childhood, even though there were some difficult times, but it just was, nobody had a family like I did. People used to just talk and say how lucky we were. We had such a Lord, because we were so close. And my father had no family here. Nobody survived the war. He was here all by himself. So he became my mother's family. I mean, it just was, just another brother or brother-in-law. Just very close, yeah. And they cared for us. It was an unbelievable situation. I still had a grandmother that lived with Aunt Esther. My Aunt Esther had a store. She used to make lingerie. She used to make nightgowns and, things that they don't wear today, but for bridal trousseaux. And she used to make them, and Aunt Molly used to go to a store and bring home an item that Aunt Esther would copy and make it. And she would make trousseaux for brides. And my grandmother lived with her in the back of the store. They had an apartment in the Bronx.
Do you remember any of the stories any of your relatives used to tell you?
Oh my God. I really can't. I remember my mother telling us how when she was on the boat coming to America, they were in steerage in the poorest section of the boat, and she used to sneak upstairs and look at the other people, the rich people living there. Well, so many stories. I can't even think of anything, one particular story. There's just so much. If only you prepared me. But
Okay.
they were very close. They all had to work at a very young age to support their parents. My grandfather died when he was very young also. But they were all, my mother was married. And Uncle Abe was already born when my grandfather died. I wasn't born yet. But he died very young. And so they took care of their mother,
How was your relationship with your parents?
It was very good. I mean,
Hanging around?
parent and child relationship. My father worked 7 days a week. So when he'd come home from work, he'd come home with the newspaper and a Milky Way every single day of the week when he came home. And he wouldn't come home late. He would work 7 days, but he never came home like 10 o'clock at night. He'd always come home for dinner. We always ate dinner together. It never failed. My mother cooked for him every single day of the week. And we never ate leftovers. The food was always freshly prepared every day. On Saturday, my father was working. My mother would take us to the delicatessen, and we'd have delicatessen for lunch. The three of us, until the Depression. We were a little poor. It was hard to do. Oh, I remember when we were very young, and it was Depression time, and my mother used to say, all we need is to pay the rent, have lights in the house, and just have enough food for Daddy, because he worked so hard, and he had trouble looking for work. When we were very wealthy at one time. He owned a very large factory. He used to make uniforms for the government, and then the Depression struck us, and he lost all his money. We had a car when I was very young, and everything was gone, and we had to move out into a poorer neighborhood to be able to pay the rent. Yeah, but we were all happy, and I remember I was very tall, and it was tall and thin. It was very hard for me to get clothes, and that was a difficult thing. It was a difficult time for my mother, because she couldn't afford to buy me something better. And I remember when I was very little during the Depression, my mother would go downtown and get dolls, figures, and we would see her putting the eyes in the dolls, and I don't know, I could just see her sitting at a table and making these dolls ready to be sold. We lived in we lived in a very large apartment, and my mother rented 2 rooms to boarders in order to be able to pay the rent. And we became such good friends with these people. They were lovely. I remember a woman named Esther and a man, I don't remember his name, but they each had a bedroom, and we all had to cramp up together in the other rooms as best as we could. But it was pleasant. It was, even though there were hard times, we just enjoyed being together. We just did the best we could under the circumstances.
Did you ever get in trouble?
Oh, I imagine I did. I don't remember anything really spectacular. I don't remember. I don't remember getting into trouble as a kid. I can't even think.
Could you try and remember what the worst thing you did was?
I can't even think of anything that was so terrible. I just don't remember. I didn't do things like my husband did, climbing over fences. My father used to say, well, since I'm working and I'm not home, you may not drive a bike, you may not have skates, and I did not have skates, and I did not have a bike, and it just was not allowed in my house. My father would not stand for it. He says, I am not there to take care of you, and you cannot do this. I remember we lived in a 5th or 6th floor walk-up in the Bronx in an apartment house, and we just became so friendly with our neighbors because everybody on the top floor didn't have to walk up and down, so someone would help them with groceries. They'd not have to go up and down all day long. You know, there was always someone would say, do you need anything? The telephone was in the hallway of the floor. You know, like we lived on the 6th floor, there must have been 5 or 6 apartments. There was a telephone in the hallway. And people would call and everybody would answer it and say, I want to speak to Mrs. Wiener, I want to speak, and they would answer the phone for you. We had really, really very nice neighbors, and we all got along so well. And just fact, I'm reading a book called Bronx Primitive, which describes this in a Bronx apartment house, how the neighbors became so friendly.
What did you look like when you were little?
I don't know. I looked tall and gawky, and dark hair. My hair was very dark. Short. Most of the time when I was very young, it was short. I'm trying to remember a picture of myself when I was very little. Just buck teeth. All I can remember is tall and thin and long arms and long legs. And I just don't remember anything particular.
How would you describe yourself as a child? Were you happy?
I was a happy child. Right. I must say my mother, because my mother was the one who took care of us, basically. And she really outdid herself. I mean, she cooked and baked and took care of us, the three of us. It was a wonderful family. We had one, and the fact that my aunts were always there. There was never a day that my aunts did not come to see us. There was never a day that my mother and her sister, and they used to fight. Those three sisters used to fight. That was the funniest thing. They used to fight and argue and yell, but they never remained angry. They were always there to take care of us. When my brother was 13, when Uncle Ben was 13, he was playing ball and he got hit in the knee with a hard ball, baseball. And he was in bed one day and not feeling well. And my Aunt Esther came in the house and she looked at him, she said, and they called us by their Jewish names, Yumi, Vami, and Brindle. And she looked at him and she said, "What's wrong?" And she took the cover off the bed and his knee was swollen. He was so sick. They took him into the hospital. He was there for a couple of months. He practically missed his first year of high school. He had pus that came from that knee up into his lungs. They had to remove them with needles. It was just an unbelievable time for my parents. Very, very difficult time. But thank God he survived, and he was okay until he died at a very young age, but not due to that.
What was your best memory as a child?
It's just my family. I can't think of anything that was better than my family. I can't think. Uncle Otto and my Aunt Esther, my Aunt Molly and Uncle Otto, he was a painting contractor. And he bought a Dodge car, I remember, with mica windows and a soft roof. And they would take me everywhere, take my brothers. I mean, it was just family, really. I can't say I had a best friend. I just had friends, but there was nothing like this family. It just was amazing, amazing. Yeah.
Do you remember your worst memory?
Yeah, how many of them died, that was the worst. How many of them got sick. The first one was my Uncle Otto. He was on a job doing some painting work. It was some sort of construction job, and a brick fell on his head, and that was it. He died a short while afterwards. He could not survive it. It was really very, very sad. That was the first one. By then, I think Uncle Ben was already in the service. The World War had not begun yet for the United States, but men were already conscripted and drafted into the Army. And he was in the Army for my 16th birthday. I remember he was home that day. And then on December 7th, 1941, he and Aunt Mildred, they weren't married yet, but they were dating, and we lived on Westchester Avenue in a big apartment, and they had gone to the movies, and while we were home, we heard the announcement by President Roosevelt that the Second World War, on December 7th, 1941, and they were in the movies about half a block away, and they came home because all the servicemen had to report to their bases. They had to leave. So even though we'd been through a depression before, it was not as bad as that when my brother was called back into service, back to the base, because then we knew that we were involved in the Second World War after Japan invaded Hawaii, blew up Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. So that was a very sad day. I thought my father would not survive it. It was very difficult for him. Yeah.
Did you have a nickname when you were little?
They would, well, as I said, my parents would call me Brindle, and I think even my aunts called me that. My friends would call me Beatty. They would call me Beatty, Beaty. Yeah, that was what they called me.
How'd you get those names?
Huh?
How'd you get those names?
Well, short for Beatrice, and B was easy. Beatty is just a normal way to give you a nickname, Beatty. Yeah.
Who were your best friends?
I had very good friends in public school. Not so much in public school, but junior high school, because we traveled on the train to, I'm sorry. We went to junior high school by trolley car. But I had some friends in junior high school. People lived in my building. Kids lived in my building. We didn't do certain things, that kids did. And I went to Jewish school. I went to Hebrew school every afternoon because my brothers were going, and I said, I want to go too, and I did go. And at that time, we went like 4 days a week, not every other day. But I went to Hebrew school every day from the time I was a little girl until, when I could read and write English. And I went to Hebrew school, went to Talmud Torah first, and then I went to Arbiter Ring Shul, which was Workman's Circle, and I learned Yiddish, to read and write Yiddish. And then I started in their high school, and my mother had to take me downtown every Saturday, and she didn't like that idea, so I stopped going. Yeah.
How would you describe the perfect day when you were young?
That is a hard description. I suppose just getting up in the morning, having your breakfast, going out to play. We played rope, we jumped rope, we played at the curbs because there were no cars parked. There were very few cars. We used to play immies, marbles. We used to play rope. We used to jump rope. We used to do double dutch. We used to play with jacks. Always on the street. We'd be out on the street till it was dark. And we all lived in the same area in tenement houses, a block apart. My brothers played outside with their friends all day. We used to have people coming by selling with ovens, selling hot potatoes, hot white potatoes, hot sweet potatoes, and a guy coming by with jelly, and you would have jelly apples, jelly marshmallows, jelly apricots on a stick, and that was what we knew. We just didn't, it was fine. It was perfect.
Did you guys did you play in the snow?
We played in the snow. Yeah, we were always outside. We were never inside if we could be outside. If it was ever, we all wore galoshes, the old-fashioned rubber boots. and dressed warmly, but we were always outside. We were never inside. All we had was the radio. There was no such thing as a television set. We would sit by the radio and listen to Buck Rogers of the 25th century, and they would have like soap operas on the radio. I can't remember the names of them, but lots of them. And we would listen, just sit there and listen all around the radio.
When you were younger, how did you imagine your life when you would get older?
I don't know. That's really hard to say. We live for the moment. I don't think we look forward to too much. I can't, to get out of the funk that we were in maybe when we were so poor. I remember wearing the same dress for the holidays all the time, and it was getting so short, and I can't remember. I just looking forward to just a day at a time. I can't remember looking forward to. Then, of course, as I got older, we were looking forward to the summers. We'd go away to the mountains. My parents would go to a hotel in the mountains, and they would take me. But before then, when we were very young, I don't think we looked forward to anything more than the next day.
When you were kind of older, starting to go into your higher grades of school, did you imagine yourself in any careers or?
Somehow or other, I thought I would be a teacher, because don't forget, the teacher was never wrong. Never, ever. There was no such thing. It was always the student. It was never the teacher that was wrong. And I think that's what I had thought I would want to be until I got older and didn't feel that was what I wanted. And then at that time, by then I thought I would get married and have children, and that would be it. Maybe never work, just be a housewife and a mother. But of course, times change.
How did your life become different than what you imagined?
Well, I think the war had a lot to do with it. And I had already knew Grandpa, and we were corresponding. And in the correspondence, we knew that we were going to be married. We knew that we would be husband and wife. That was very difficult. The war was very difficult. Uncle Abe, nobody was hurt in the war, but Uncle Abe went to India, China, Burma, India. Uncle Ben went to Germany, but they were already married. Aunt Mildred and Uncle Ben were married. And I thought that would be the next thing for me, would be get out of school, graduate college, and get married. And soon after, we did. Yeah.
If you could interview anyone from your life, living or dead, but not a celebrity, who would it be? It could be anyone.
Oh, God. Who would it be? I can't even. Probably, I think, not a celebrity and not anyone other than maybe, I keep thinking of her all the time, my Aunt Esther, because she was Orthodox, but she was so kind. And she was the oldest of those 4 children. Her parents had already lost 6 in Europe. They all died. So the 4 that came to America, they were the only ones that, and she had, I think as a child, she had some disease. She must have had diphtheria. Her face was all pockmarked. But she was such a kind woman. And I think she had a lot to tell. And you know what? And I think we never got into it. And another person would have been my father, because he had a lot to tell, and somehow or other we did not get into it, and then he died. So suddenly, those are people. My Aunt Molly, she was a businesswoman. She was the youngest of the four, next to the youngest. But she and Uncle Jaime, the youngest one, went to school in America. My mother and Aunt Esther had to go right to work when they came here, because they had to support the family. So I think those would be the most interesting. What my father's life was like in Europe, and all the children. There were children born after he came here. There was a child born, I think, after he came here. What? Just never got to know. And you know what? And he never spoke about it. He never spoke about Europe. Never did. He was so disturbed when he found out what had happened.
How did you and Grandpa meet?
We met on the street. I had a friend, Seymour Whitman, who lived in my building, and he introduced me to Daddy and all their friends. And I had friends, and I introduced them to them, and so we were a very nice group together. Yeah.
How did he propose to you?
I don't think there was a formal proposal. I think we just agreed to get married, with all the correspondence we had during the war, and then it was just a natural thing. It was the next thing to do, was to get married, right?
Can you tell me about your wedding?
My wedding. Yes. Grandpa was working in New Jersey, and it was a snowy weekend. There was a big storm. He had to walk to the train station. He had to walk a long time to get home, to get to the wedding on Sunday. He started to walk Saturday afternoon and really had a big trek in front of him to get home in time for the wedding on Sunday. And oh God, it was lovely. All my friends, the food was terrible. It was terrible, and these were friends of ours who were the caterers. We got married at a big hotel in the Bronx. It was called the Plaza, I think? I don't know. Concourse Plaza. Concourse Plaza was called. And the food was a disgrace. Everything else went all right, but the food was terrible. Everybody remarked.
Do you remember what they said?
And we don't know if the food was terrible because of the weather problem. People couldn't get to work. It was a real terrible storm. And then after the wedding on Monday, we flew down. The first time we went into an airplane, we flew down to Florida for the
And that was when airplanes were like fancy.
They were pretty, yeah. And the storm, our parents were going crazy. Yeah. Harold's mother, Grandma Lena, and my mother and father. They were so concerned. We came home in a storm.
And they were in, so it wasn't a common thing. So
Yeah,
people
well,
didn't
no.
really know.
I'm trying to think. I think all my friends who got married at the same time or around the same time, I think a few of them flew down already, but maybe not in that storm. It was a storm.
How did it feel when he went into the army?
It was, everybody was going in. They were all going in. My brothers, Harold, all his friends. It was just the thing to do, I suppose. We all felt bad for them, but they all left about the same time. Everybody, there were no men left, no young boys left on the streets. And that's where we stood. My friend's father had a cleaning store. And so we would stand that's what we would do in the evening. Stand in front of the store, all very nice people, very nice children. I mean, just stand and have. And our friends across the street lived in a tenement right across the street from the cleaning store. They'd come down, and we would just socialize. That's how we socialized.
Just meet up on the street.
Right. And then when I know when the boys went in, we all took a trolley car across to the other side of the Bronx. There was a Y across the Crotona Park. Crotona Park? Yes, it was Crotona Park. There was a Y, and we would go there every Saturday night, just to socialize, right?
Wait, I have a question. Did
Huh?
you do anything for the war?
I remember a friend of mine, who was it? Laura and I went to, we didn't do anything for the war, but we went to a nursing home, and we would work as go from bed to bed, trying to cheer people up. I know, that was during the war. That was during the war. We would do that on the weekends. We would go to this nursing home. We had to take a trolley car across.
Did you like to do a lot of, the community service, going to nursing homes?
No, well, that I did. That we did in a nursing home.
Did you enjoy, going out and just...
Well, we enjoyed doing that. And we could stay out late at night. Nothing happened. We would drive on the trolley cars at night, go in the subways at night, go on whenever I went to school, junior high school was far away from our house. There was no such thing as busing. Everybody had to find their own way. We had to take, when I was young in junior high school, I had to take a trolley car and then change for another trolley car. If it was nice out, it was a very long walk, but we would do it. But if the weather was bad, you'd have to take one trolley car, goes one way, and another one across town. And there was no closer junior high school. It was, when I went to junior high school, we were the first class that did not have to wear black stockings to school. It was public school, junior high school 60. We had the first year that the girls did not have to wear black stockings to school. Otherwise, you had to wear black stockings all the time. And if the weather was bad, my mother would meet me in a candy store and bring me lunch. So I didn't have to go back. You had to leave the school lunchtime. You could not stay in school for lunch. There was no such thing as a lunchroom,
When did you first find out?
I'm mixing up times, I know. But I remember as we go.
When did you first find out that you'd be a parent?
Oh. Well, about the first time I was pregnant, I had a miscarriage before knowing. So the next time, she was born in June, so I became pregnant September.
Mm-hmm.
I knew right away. You miss your period.
How did you feel?
I felt wonderful. I threw up one time with Naomi because I ate an apple and went to bed, and I was never nauseous with any of them. Like everybody's nauseous for 3 months. Mm-hmm. I never was nauseous with them. I knew I was pregnant right away because I had heartburn. That's what I had, right away, heartburn. Yeah.
Can you describe the moment when you saw Aunt Noni for the first time?
I really That's hard to remember. The first time. She was born a Saturday afternoon. I can't remember. Well, they must have brought the baby to me. And she weighed 6 pounds, 14 ounces. She had a round face, very little hair. Surprised them.
Were you happy?
Oh, of course we were happy. And she was not so happy.
Well, yeah.
Oh, she was not a happy child.
Well, you know.
Yeah. She cried for 3
Literally
months.
cried for the first.
She was colicky. And we lived with my parents because it was right after the war. We couldn't get a place to live. And she would be up all night long. And if it wasn't for my parents and Aunt Molly and Uncle Abe and everybody pitching in so we could sleep for a little while. My mother used to have a poker game in the house, my mother and father, and she would sit in the playpen and watch the play at night. Yeah, so we could go out.
How about the 3 others?
3 others. Well, Shari. I'll never forget. We told them when Shari was late about 2 weeks, after the due date. And so we told my mother, she was home alone, of course. It was Saturday. We told my mother, Ma, I have to go over to Alexander's to get something. So Grandpa and I left. We went to the hospital. We were ready to give birth. Yeah. They had to induce labor. At that time, they induced labor. So, so she was born.
What about Uncle Michael?
Well, Uncle Michael was a pain in the neck because he was born very easily. Uncle Michael's older than Shari. So Naomi was 2 years old, and we were outside. There was a park. We lived in a private house. Aunt Molly lived in an apartment in the private house about 2 houses away, and we lived in about a house away. And we went to the park. It was July 4th. It was the weekend of July 4th, so there was no work.
So there were a bunch of festivities going on.
Yeah, right.
And,
It was Thursday.
excitement.
I can't remember. I think it was a Thursday. And we were walking around. I had a big belly, and all of a sudden I said to Daddy,
Let's go.
No, he was in the house. He was in Molly's apartment playing cards.
Of course.
And Myra and Uncle Abe. And I said, I think you better call Harold. I think I have to go to the hospital. Yeah, and he was born within a half hour.
Oh.
Yeah, he was born very fast.
What about Mom?
Huh? Is it time to go?
No, Grandma. All right.
Oh God, there's so much stuff.
How about Mom? What was Mom like? Was she the problem child?
She was the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, she was also a little late, and Shari was in school. Grandma was in the hospital. I gave birth to your mother, and they would not let me go downstairs in the same hospital to see her. I had to go home, change my clothes, and I went back to the hospital to see her.
What were just gonna go off the questions for a second.
And
what
she was very small. Mommy was 5'5", 5'6", very small. Very small baby.
What were Aunt Noni and Uncle Michael with you at the time?
No.
What was it like when they first saw?
Shari,
Mom.
your mother was downstairs. Ma, looking at me in the hospital. I was about 6 floors up. Yeah, she waved to me.
Oh, you could.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I remember that. Naomi and Michael were in school. But she went to a public school right around the corner. They were. Hey, go away.
Come over here.
They were already in. Michael was in.
Aunt Noni was 18, right?
16.
Oh, so
16.
she wasn't.
Yeah,
as
they were both in high school.
Much older than Mom. How did you choose their names?
Okay, well, we choose names from our relatives who died. So Aunt Noni was Nechama Enya, that's my father's mother. Michael was Grandpa's father, Maya Laser. Michael was. And Shari was my grandmother plus Grandpa's mother, Suralea. And your mother was Grandma plus Velia. Her name was Leah Velia. We didn't know what to do with the V. What could we call her in English? A V. So we called at least a V. Yeah. But we always named for the dead, you know, for a relative.
Why did you choose these people?
Because they were our family. Well, we wanted my father to have at least some name
Right.
of his father, of his mother. And that's the thing. We wanted to repeat
The names.
well, the
to keep
names.
going
We
down.
wanted to be able to remember the names.
Who has been the most important person in your life?
Well, I suppose it's Grandpa. You know, after 60, almost 65 years of marriage, he had to be the most important person. The one I spend my whole life with.
Right.
I mean, it just...
What was the happiest moment?
Well, there were lots of them. Having my children, that was very
That's
happy.
a pretty...
And having them all graduate from college and get married and have children of their own. Those are the happiest moments of your life. Yeah.
What was the saddest?
Oh, losing all those people. Losing everybody. I mean, it just... And Esther went first. I think then Grandma Lena. And then Dad. And then my father. And then it just kept going. Uncle Jaime, when Naomi was a baby, he was so sick. He was so sick. That was really the first tragedy of the family.
Right.
That was very sad. And he had a wife and 3 children, young children. They were all very young. But our families, Aunt Esther, Aunt Molly, my mother, they were all supported. But it was very sad. It was very sad. The deaths of all this family, this close
Right.
family. Yeah.
Who has been the biggest influence on your life?
I don't know. I just can't. I think the biggest influence of my life was my family when we were as a young aunts, uncles, because they brought us up the way we want to bring up our families.
Right.
Close and
What-
caring.
What lessons did these people teach you?
Oh, what questions? What lessons? How to be kind, how to care. That's all I can say. I'll never forget them because they were the backbone of our family. They were the backbones of this family. How this family grew up through them, through the way they trained us and taught us how to be people. You know, how to be nice, how to be mentioned. Right. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So this one is a little interesting.
But you know what? We don't mention Harold's family at all. Grandpa's family.
Right.
He had a very nice family. Very nice. He had a lovely, lovely family, and we should remember them. You know? Yeah.
What is your earliest memory?
Getting bitten by a dog when I was a little baby. Wait a minute. Somewhere I have the marks. When we were still living in Brooklyn, in Flatbush, I was bitten by a neighbor's dog. A big dog, because I was taking something away from him. And I was bitten somewhere, right here. I still have the marks somewhere. I don't know. But that I remember clearly. I was very young. Yes.
If you could hold on to one memory from your life forever, what would it be?
I think getting married, having my own family. Yeah. I think that was the most memorable. You know, I think.
All right. Well, so that's it for now.
Oh, thank God.
So, you made it through this, Grandma.
Really.
Did a pretty good
There's
job.
so many things I can
Yes.
think of now that you.
Well,
There's
if you have
just
anything
so
else you'd like to say.
No, enough.
Okay.
Enough.
All right. All right. Bye.